Alina, welcome to my Diversity and Inclusion Q&A initiative. It really is a pleasure to welcome you today.
Hi, Ali. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's very cool that I'm here with you.
It would be great if you could please firstly introduce yourself.
I'm Alina. I'm a senior manager in KPMG UK. So KPMG is a global company which does audit and consulting, but they have been investing quite a lot of resources recently into the growth of innovation, technology, and analytics. So what I tend to do is work with multiple financial services clients like banks and insurance companies to bring them on the journey of innovation and analytics. I tend to focus a lot on cloud, and that is kind of a growing area for us. I do wider stuff as well, which has to do with machine learning, AI, so anything to do with technology. What is very specific around me is I don't look at technology as a standalone technology. I look at it through the business use case. So that if you have a client or if the client needs something, they get the business value out of it rather than just coding or doing, something and then not seeing the outputs.
What is your typical day as a senior manager?
Because I do consulting, it's quite varied. I lead the cloud risk proposition. So it's essentially, I'm a global lead on it in KPMG, and that's why there are many projects which I would oversee from the cloud risk and compliance and regulatory lens. I would say I do a mix of stuff. So I do a lot of selling, pitching to clients, but I do quite a lot of delivery and just oversight of that delivery. What is interesting and maybe different from some of my peers is I work quite a lot internationally. So I'm one of the few, perhaps more junior resources that interact with KPMG member firms in different countries globally. And the objective really is to bring them together on the journey of cloud innovation analytics and to essentially see how we can share our lessons learned with them and then subsequently bring something from them if they have anything to share, with UK. In the past, before the pandemic, I used to travel really a lot. Now it's perhaps less so, but it's still quite interesting because it's working with different diverse cultures and diverse audience day to day. So that's something what I do as part of my job. In addition to that, I do quite a lot of mentoring. I wouldn't say that it purely comes from my KPMG hat on, but it is certainly something which we welcome as a firm. So I've been doing some support for a number of networks targeted at women or perhaps diverse migrants in the space of technology or business.
What do you enjoy the most about your current position?
I really like that I'm not purely doing delivery, that I'm having this external focus in terms of speaking to wider clients, but then also just doing this wider mentoring, the wider presentations. And I want to grow more in that area. So I was offered position. I wouldn't say it's an official position, but I was offered to be a spokeswoman for KPMG in the sector of technology and innovation. So I'm currently doing more stuff in writing, but the idea is to transition me more in terms of speaking to newspapers and television, which would be great.
Coming from a very strong background in consulting, what kind of mindset do you feel is required for this?
It's quite important to be able to adapt very quickly and to be flexible. One thing I always tell to my teams or my stakeholders, it's very important to adapt early in the process. So one of the things is feedback and asking for feedback early. There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of changing parts. They say that in consulting, you can do whatever you may want to do, but you need to drive your journey yourself because it's not something that you come to a job and 9 to 5 or 9 to 7, you do the same thing for a year. It's very changing. My kind of objective was to do more external focused stuff. And this is why I have been developing more in that space. But say some of my peers really want to be very technical, very delivery focused. So they have been doing a lot of training and delivery in big data, right? And the journey is different, but you need to decide what it is, the key stuff you want to do.
Did you know that working in tech was always what you wanted to do?
No, no, not really. I mean, to be very honest, I didn't really know about tech that much. So as I was growing up, I was more on the journey of being a housewife. But I guess when I became more of a sensible age, I did want to earn money and to find a job. But one of the things I didn't quite know and I didn't quite have at the time was the role models in terms of what are the different journeys you could have and how can you develop.
Mm.
I am originally from Russia. So in Russia, it works a little bit different in terms of finding jobs. I think consultancy is less of a typical type of work which you do, and a lot of consultancies would be the foreign firms like KPMG or Accenture, but not so much the Russian companies. I guess a pivoting time for me was my education. So I did do a very technical, theoretical bachelor and master's in mathematics. It helped me when I was looking for a job in the UK because they did say, oh, you would look good for technology, but I was quite open for a number of roles. In fact, I applied to many, many jobs, and not all of them were technology.
It's great to hear that you took the initiative to study mathematics. Was there
Mhm.
anything in particular that you really enjoyed about math?
I was really good in maths. I used to go to a very normal and general school, but I managed to win an Olympiad in maths when I was in ninth grade, and then another Olympiad when I was in 11th grade. So I did go to a special math school for 2 years. It was interesting. The challenge I've had with my degrees, it was quite theoretical, and I was a little bit lost by the time I was in the middle of the degree because I kind of liked it, but I didn't know how to apply it.
Mm.
So I would say that the key things which the degree helped me do is to train my brain to adapt very quickly, to learn quickly, and to understand quickly.
It's interesting that you mention as well, you didn't really have a role model as such
Mm.
that inspired you to get involved into a career in tech. So I can imagine that's why you really pride yourself in mentorship now as well, giving people these role models that you didn't necessarily have. And I know it's something you value. How has having positive mentors benefited your career later on down the line?
In the start of my career, I didn't really understand the value of mentorship, and perhaps I didn't use it that much. We do have something which is assigned as part of your work. So I used to work in Accenture, and you would have a career counselor, which is an obligatory type of role, and you have to have them whether you get along with them or perhaps you don't get along with them.
Mm.
And I think what happened with me, I did have a period of time when perhaps I wasn't so happy with my career. So I did change my career counselor to another person who was treating me more on a personal level, going from the point of view, what is it that really matters to you? And perhaps not having the framework, such as like, let's meet once a month and talk about these 10 questions which you want to talk about, but it felt like he really cared about what is it I feel and what is it I want to do. And that was a changing point for me in terms of mentorship. I do find that when I didn't really have a mentor, I would try and do really very many things. And I think I'm quite good in doing what I'm doing, but I was just doing everything which I could do, and it could be a little bit more targeted, more strategic, and just make me more happy instead of just going in doing every single thing. And mentorship has helped me focus my energy into the prioritized areas which bring the best benefits just based on the experience of the other people, what they can share with me. And I think that's probably what I value most.
I know that you also personally struggle to, I guess, find a mentor and sponsor who would stand up for you in difficult times. So, of course, you went through one stage of changing your career counselor, but how else did you overcome this blocker?
I just want to say that I've had 9 career counselors in 6 years. So I did change them quite a few times. I also started thinking about it broader because, to be honest, you can have mentors in different areas. And you don't have to have just one person to mentor you. And you don't really have to have it as an official relationship. You can have some sort of informal mentorship. So for example, what I'm doing at the moment and what I've been doing maybe for the last few months is finding the people or identifying the people who I really like and they are quite successful in what they do. It may be different areas. It may be a career. It may be like public speaking. It may be something to do with psychology. And I reach out to them to essentially to interact with them. It can be that they have some courses which I can buy and listen to, or they may have some interactive consultations which I could again get part of. So what I found out, the key for me is not to wait that somebody is going to appear in your life at some point in time and make it better, but more to think about it strategically. Where do you want to get to? And essentially just reach out yourself and see how it goes. I do want to say that perhaps some people with who I'm interacting today are not the people who I would have thought want to interact with me under, I guess, normal circumstances. So one of them is a radio host in Russia who used to work on Channel 4. And then there is also Miss Russia who won this beauty competition. So I never thought that they actually perhaps want to interact with someone like me. At least some time ago, that was my perception. But what I found out is there is an opportunity of reaching out to these people. Some of them may not respond straight away, but generally people want to help you and they value the fact that, you want to become better. And if you are a quick learner and you really plan to kind of spend the effort on it, they will invest time. And that is kind of the key thing which changed my behavior and made me adapt my approach.
So let's say you found a mentor that you're happy with.
Mm-hmm.
How can you understand the feedback that they give you and act upon it to get the best outcomes?
First of all, agree with your mentor. What is it you want them to mentor you on so that they're quite clear in terms of what type of feedback you are expecting? What I found is if you work in a corporate, there is an official process of getting this feedback and there are official standards of certain timelines and certain forms how this practically works. When you have informal mentorship, it doesn't necessarily work in the same structure. So it can be someone telling you from time to time as you meet them some points of things which are advice, and it's not necessarily written down or set in stone, but you just grab it and act upon it. What I've been doing, I've been asking different people for different opinions, and I would always get different perspectives. And then I would essentially try to come up with an action plan. What is it exactly I need to do? Because sometimes you find different people see you from a different lens. They could be either too close to you or not too close to you, or they just have their own experience. And the key for me is to collect all of this bundle of feedback across key areas together, structure it, and then ultimately logically apply it to my personal situation and try to agree a set of actions with myself for the next 2 or 3 months. Now, what is quite important with this is not just to do an action plan, because sometimes people say, yes, I'm going to do it, but then a week passes and they don't do anything. What's important is to try acting as soon as possible and then try to get some sort of either habits or routine or some sort of daily small actions which you can do to make it happen.
I know you're also a part of a few networks that promote mentorship as well, so I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
I'm actually helping 3 networks at the moment. One of them is Kajigo. So Kajigo is an online platform which is targeted at schoolgirls who are between the age of 13 and 18. And it's more an online platform where you can listen to mentors like myself and my peers in terms of the video recordings. So it's meant to inspire you, give you some practical advice, but at the same time, it's not necessarily scheduled meetings, right? If you want, you can reply, you can ask for further questions, but it's more done as part of the platform, it's more offline. What is interesting is they do have a future forward-looking schedule of actually going to schools so that the schoolgirls can see these mentors live and ask them something, more specific perhaps, but still this more works as an app, if this makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 networks, so one is migrant workers, which is more targeted at different migrant minorities who perhaps don't have substantial money to, like, go to universities, but they do want to be successful in their job. And then the second one is like-minded females. So it is more girls, women who may want to go to technology, maybe they're not sure, or they maybe don't really know yet. They want to find out, or maybe they know, but they want to talk to somebody. And I think what's interesting about these networks is there is a very good thinking, thought process made in advance in terms of matching the mentor and the mentee. And this allows to have a targeted interest, hopefully, which works together much more closely than if you just do it on an online platform. And what I've been doing there, I've been doing like targeted one-to-one sessions with the girls and the guys. That is something which we take offline, but we would have them roughly, I don't know, once in 2 weeks, once in a month, depending on the situation. These platforms, they're all free of charge, so it's all kind of non-profit.
Great that you're involved in so many different areas. One thing I want to ask, Alina, because I feel that a lot of people want to get involved in mentoring, but it's finding the time and obviously managing and juggling everything, work, life, mentoring. What advice can you share here out of interest on managing your time so you can get involved in all of these different things?
I do want to admit that I do struggle with time sometimes. And right now I'm spending a lot of effort on mentorship because it is quite important for me to give back to community. There are opportunities in some companies, in corporates, for example, to have volunteer days which you can spend on mentorship. But you may want to spend your own time. So I'm doing mentoring on weekends because I don't have enough time during weekdays. In terms of time management, I would share kind of a couple of advice. Number one is think about what is really, really important to you based on where you want to go to. And you need to think through where you want to go to before you can prioritize. And number two, I've been trying some time management techniques. So one of them is called Pomodoro. Pomodoro is when you try to focus on one thing for 25 minutes without checking your emails or looking at Instagram or doing something else. It is an app, but it's essentially making sure that you are clearly targeting these 25 minutes to get the job done. And then you have a 5 minutes break where you can do whatever you want to do. And then you start again, 25 minutes. Now, this works for some people and sometimes it doesn't. Like in my case, I have to go on calls, which may be 30 minutes or an hour, and I can't just listen to Pomodoro, for example. So it's a little bit washed out throughout the day. But sometimes it works if you have like a more targeted task, like if you want to write a dissertation or you have an actual report to write, and then you can do it without starting to go do random stuff. What I'm trying to do at the moment is to limit some of the time. For example, I'm spending checking Instagram, right? And one of the techniques which was shared with me, which I want to use, but I haven't used yet, but it's more thinking about your day and actually writing down what is it you spend time on and categorizing it. So for example, spending time with your husband or spending time on your work and spending time, I don't know, on your hobby, right? And when you do it, say for a week, you would be able to identify the time which you kind of get a little bit wasted. And then it's your action of how you want to address it. So unless you action, it's quite hard to address it. But that's something which I know some of my colleagues have been doing and it was helping them.
I definitely need to implement some of these tips because that's one thing I struggle with is finding time to manage everything, especially with YouTube video editing and things like that. Throughout your journey, you've really showcased pure resilience and determination. I know when you were in Russia, you made over, I believe, 500 job applications and got 497 declines. So I want to know, Alina, how did you find the motivation to keep going?
I don't think I've ever said it to anyone before, but it actually took me between a year and a half and 2 years to get a job in UK. In the start, I didn't plan to do 500 applications, but One of the challenges I've had, I was getting those declines and I did want to get a job and I didn't want to stop in the middle of somewhere, and I wasn't quite sure when I'm going to get an offer, so I kept going. I think what is interesting around those applications specifically, which again I haven't really mentioned in other interviews, is they were all for starting roles, like graduate roles. And the challenge with that is recruiters don't really like helping you on graduate roles because they don't actually get the bonus for it. And the second thing, because I'm on a work permit, not all graduate roles give you this work permit because you're not too senior enough, and I guess your salary is not in the right banding. So those were kind of the two complicating factors for me. I had to apply online, and the way this practically works, I had a list of every single company which is approved by the Home Office in terms of giving the sponsorship. So there are tiers A and tiers B. A is who will probably give you a visa, and B who could give you a visa if you're really, really very good and they want to give you a visa. So that roughly totaled up to those 500 jobs, roughly. And because I was applying for a graduate, it was a very time-taking process because I had to answer the question, why is it this job? And it's a mini essay. Why is it not another job? It's a mini essay. And how do you think you're going to grow in this job? So I had to actually read about every single job, whether it's audit or technology or asset management or investment banking, and know everything about who are the competitors, what is the type of work you do, why do you want to do this? And sometimes when I was having interviews, it was like 2 interviews a day. And in one, it was, I really want to do audit because this is everything what is happening in audit. And the second would be, I really want to do technology. So I was quite persistent. The key thing which motivated me is I didn't want to accept that I can't find a job. And I didn't have anyone who I knew found a job at that period in time or before. So I was quite interested what will happen if I just keep doing this.
So for anyone out there experiencing similar at the moment, what strategies can you share that you've used to help you stay resilient?
Number one is it's good to do planning in advance, to be very honest. So now that I think back about it, maybe I shouldn't have applied to 500 jobs, right? Maybe it's been more strategic from the very start. Like, these are the dates of the application. And I know that for graduate jobs in the UK, they usually open a year in advance if these are kind of big companies. So you could check it out, say, in August, rather than finding out in November that you applied and all places are taken. So it's been strategic. What is kind of the sub list of companies you want to apply to? Checking out in advance, these are the dates of the application, these are kind of the types of questions they ask. And then when you come to interviews, preparing very well, these are the types of things people tend to ask. I think after you do it, I don't know, after I've done it for 50 companies, probably I passed every single interview after that. But it's either you practice live in terms of going to those interviews, or you practice in advance to make sure that you happen. There are some techniques which are more visualizing your goals and thinking about your goal, and the more you think about it, the more motivated you become.
Now, on the other side of things, you're a hiring manager. So I just wondered from your side, how can people stand out in what is a very crowded job market?
There is some stuff which you can do on paper. So, for example, if you apply for a role in analytics and you know in advance that this is the role you want to do, you tailor your CV to that role, right? So if they ask you, do you know these technical tools, then you try to tailor it. Now, I've seen very many job specs being quite generic. So having a good CV is good, right? But it's not the only thing which perhaps helps you get hired. I would say number 2 is having a good network with your recruiters. If you can go for a recruiter, if you're not a grad. Similar as with mentors, I would value having that list of maybe 5 or 3 recruiters that actually do want to represent you and do want, to keep going together with you. Number 3 is when you actually come to an interview, what I've seen other people do when they were not very successful is they prepare. I mean, they learn all the questions by heart. They do all this in-depth research of every single question they would ask. But then it comes out like too machinery like, right? So you can't see the person, you can't see what is driving that person, what is it they want to do. So ideally, and it's quite hard to do it without practice, you come in as yourself, at the same time you are prepared, and at the same time, depending how the conversation goes, if say they ask you some other question which wasn't on your list, or some random question which people in corporates like asking in an interview, you can just naturally answer to them without having to go through your script and figuring out, oh my God, I haven't actually known the answer to this question. So those are kind of the key things.
This is going to be really helpful for people, because I do speak to so many individuals right now and they are struggling. They're not hearing anything back from companies or receiving countless rejections. So keep going, don't give up, and apply Alina's top tips. So once you got your visa, of course, and your job application was accepted, you then relocated to London and didn't know anyone. Fast forward to now, and you've been recognised as the Tech Women 100 and also as the rising star in technology. I just want to firstly say congratulations. That is so fantastic and incredibly well deserved. How did you initially make these new connections and build effective relationships, coming to London, not knowing anyone?
To be honest, it was quite hard for me. So I'll probably again tell a story which I've never told to anyone. Now, there is a network, LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is actually blocked in Russia, and it has been blocked, I think, since 2015. Networking wasn't something which I knew about in the past. At least I didn't necessarily understand the value of it. And I did register on LinkedIn. I didn't really have any followers, and I guess now I have more than 10,000 at the moment. I used to just use LinkedIn for the sake of finding out what are these people, what are they doing, what type of jobs they do. And to be honest, it helped me to prepare for the interviews, because sometimes what I find is you come for a job interview in Accenture and they ask you the question, so what do you know about the projects we do? What is the kind of day-to-day which you do? Have you met anyone? Have you spoken to anyone? And then I would in advance look at the people who worked in Accenture from my connections or maybe second connections, and just figure out these are the types of jobs, and this is specifically, sometimes they talk about specific examples. So that was how I started using LinkedIn. And I guess when I came to UK, I was continuing to use LinkedIn because I wasn't very sociable. And I thought if I just look at what people do, look at their posts, it's actually going to kind of help me be part of this wider culture, wider network, etc. And then what happened, I got blocked from LinkedIn because I was adding people who I didn't know. And I think one person complained to LinkedIn because he sent me a message, asked me who I am. I didn't respond because I didn't see it. And then I sent him another invite, and I guess he complains that he doesn't know me, and then they blocked me on LinkedIn. So at that point in time, I decided I need to do more social, going out and actually reaching out to people and trying to meet them in person. So what I've been doing, because I've been in Accenture at the time, I used to do to a lot of networking social events, and some of them were organized by Accenture as part of work. Mm-hmm. And some of them were wider, like I was targeting career fairs and graduate events. What I found is, because my social skills weren't so great, I found that I need to develop them. So I used to go to graduate events and just speak to different people, speak in particular to foreign students that needed a visa and just weren't sure how to make this happen, or perhaps didn't have the confidence in terms of coming to the UK as a foreigner. So I've gone to maybe 50 graduate events over the year, and I was making an effort of actually speaking to people and being maybe like a mini role model at the time. This helped me get my social skills better, and this helped me be kind of less shy and just more open, more smiling, and just better. Because I do want to admit I was a mathematician when I was at uni, and social skills weren't kind of the best part of it at the time. And I guess networking became more natural. So now I'm actually recognized as one of the best networkers in my domain, in my team. And my boss has been asking me specifically to build relationships with wider teams, wider countries, and do this networking more and more. My advice on networking is, unless you if you are not comfortable, just try to go to different events. But if you are comfortable already, think about prioritization and strategic networking, because if you go to every single event, you'll probably run out of time and you won't get the value which you want to get. So I'm now more strategic.
So it's also great, of course, that you are being recognized as the Tech Women 100. What factors do you feel contributed to this?
I don't think this is written down somewhere as a factor, but what I've been doing, I've been looking at the past winners and analyzing what, in my opinion, made them successful. I think there are three key things which are valued. Number one is you do a job, right? And you are very good in your job. So you're a high performer, high potential. And I'm sure that there are many people like this in the industry. I would say number two is a personal journey. So I think what the judges want to see is the growth element, I guess, where you were before and what challenges you've had, how did you overcome them, and how did you come to the end goal of being this high achiever, high performer. And the third thing, they do value that you give back to the community, and giving back can be in different ways. Like you could be giving talks, or maybe doing the mentoring, or maybe helping in schools or educating other people. And that is something which judges really value.
I can see why you have been nominated for that, Alina, through all of the achievements that you have. Congratulations again. Obviously, you mentioned that a lot of the mentorship opportunities happen because of these nominations.
Yeah.
So how else did your life change after the awards?
It's changed quite dramatically, I would say, in a positive way. So number one, people that perhaps I've never spoken to before started reaching out to me. And there were two types of people, some which perhaps have never spoken to me for the last 7 years, right? And in particular, the people who I used to meet when I was unemployed and when I was looking for a job. It was quite interesting because people were just reaching out to me and saying, "Oh, hello, do you remember me?" But then there were other people who are quite senior clients, and those would be very valuable for KPMG and for my work. They were more responding and also congratulating me. And I've had some very new connections who perhaps I didn't think would be interested in getting to know me. So that is number one. Number two were the mentorship opportunities, which I talked about. And I think number three, and that was kind of my personal choice, my personal agenda, I'm doing much more public speaking, much more talks, much more interviews. I, again, am going to share something which I haven't shared, but when I won Tech Women 100, I got a call from Russia. And it was from a lady who is a big advocate of women in business, not necessarily women in tech. And the general women agenda is not very big in Russia, but they were organizing the biggest first ever conference for women in business, right? And she managed to get a lot of audience for it, like people who are the head of our central bank and some politicians, etc. So she invited me over to kind of talk about my journey, give a little speech. And that was, I remember it was on 10th of December. Now, I only had like 1 week to prepare. And to be honest, public speaking wasn't my natural thing, which I keep doing, right? But they seem to advertise this event to 160,000 people. Wow. So I thought I need to come in and to do a good job. The challenge was I haven't spoken Russian for 6 years, so it was a challenge for me, and it was actually stepping up and remembering how do I speak on top of the fact that I need to do public speaking, on top of the fact that I need to have something interesting to say. And I went a lot out of comfort zone for that event. And what I realized is I want to become much more better in public speaking, and I want to do it much more naturally, right? So that I don't have to undergo the same 1 week of preparation, but do it more often, do it more easier. So I have been taking, let's say, coaching advice from a couple of mentors in Russia because I found it was more cost effective. And I did take a bit of a holiday to focus more on like public speaking and mentoring and just thinking about the future. Now, it was quite challenging for me because sometimes I had to wake up at 5 and start my public speaking class because in Russia the time zone is slightly different, right? So I had to go again out of my comfort zone. But the good thing, my boss was quite impressed, and that's how we came around thinking of making me the spokeswoman and giving me the support in terms of longer term public speaking, client speaking, etc. So that was all very positive. But I think to conclude what I want to say, the awards give you a door to open, but you need to drive it yourself.
I think it's really nice to see that the awards are almost a stepping stone. And then, like you say, it's up to you to take that next level and to excel. Out of interest, what would you say were your biggest lessons learned from the public speaking courses?
There were many lessons. I mean, to be honest, the way the Russian school works is perhaps slightly different from the UK, or at least I haven't seen it in the UK. So there are two key blocks, right? So the first one is how you say stuff, and the second one is kind of what you say, right? So if I talk about how you say it, there are the typical things around confidence, and I'm sure that you will only get it the more you practice. So you could start by small events and then go into bigger events, or you can start like me, go into a very big event, then being very scared, and then just thinking I've done it once, so I'll do it once again. Another thing which I learned was more the practical exercises, and they are more around the diction, the breathing, and then the rhetorics, if this makes sense, the voice. And what I found out is not many people actually spend a lot of time on making their voice, let's say, beautiful. You may have a good voice from nature, but you could still continue developing it. And there are a lot of exercises which radio hostesses and TV presenters tend to do, which are specifically targeted at their, voice and diction.
Wow.
I mean, a very simple exercise to share with the audience, which each one of you could do, is just reading aloud and reading aloud every day for like 10, 15, 30 minutes if you want to read. So what I'm doing at the moment, I'm reading a book about public speaking, which is TED Talk, and I'm doing it aloud. So it kind of gives me double the win. So that was kind of one very big area in terms of how. And then the what is more like thinking through what you want to say, right? And ideally having a point of view on the key areas of your life, or the key areas in terms of examples, or just thinking through your journey. What are kind of the set of 5 stories, 10 stories, 50 stories, which you could actually talk about, which would be interesting for the audience? Because what is important about public speaking, your audience needs to be interested in what you say rather than you just saying everything you want to say.
Thank you for sharing. It has been a real pleasure speaking with you today. And how I like to round off part 1 is finding out a fun fact about you and also some hobbies that you do enjoy outside of the workplace.
I guess a fun fact, I wanted to apply to the Academy of KGB. So I don't think people know that there is an Academy of KGB, but there is an Academy of KGB. And I wanted to do cryptography because I found that it's so mystical, and that's something which they show in movies. And I was rejected because they only get guys into Academy of KGB unless you are a translator. So I got rejected, but then in the end I went to do my maths. In terms of hobbies, so they've been changing over the time. I personally really used to like scrapbooking. So what I really liked about it is the variety of colors and different textures, and also the fact that nobody seems to do it apart from me, so it looks quite interesting. And I used to do these cards and just give it to my friends or like my husband, and I found that they do keep them even though a lot of time has passed, and it's something memorable which I can share, and it makes me happy in a way. It's almost like an art therapy. Other than that, I do more like the general stuff. I go traveling and I explore new cultures.
Thank you for sharing. Really interesting about the scrapbooking as well. I think that it has a real sentimental feel to it, doesn't it? When you give someone something that's handmade. It really has been so great speaking to you. And I'm looking forward to catching up next week where we can talk a little bit more about diversity and inclusion topics as well.
See you next week, Ali.